Welcome back to the War Room, powered by Draft HQ and Prep Baseball. Shooter and Svihlik back at it. I'm back on the West Coast, DJ, but I've been fixated on this one question, and it's mainly because of how great a year these two guys have had. But Bobby Witt Jr. and Gunnar Henderson, and just how great they've been. They're part of that awesome 2019 draft. And I was thinking about what would have happened if the Orioles had selected Junior at 1, and how that would have impacted what Gunnar Henderson has become, superstar shortstop. Those two guys are quickly blossoming into the face of the game. Would that have affected his development, and how would you have handled that? And would that even have been something you considered in the War Room?
That's a good question, Sheer. Would I have considered that? Taking 2 high school shortstops? Why not? I guess that's a good pond to fish in, right? Especially if you have those types of talents and those types of tools. I definitely don't think it would have affected me. It didn't affect me last year when we had the opportunity to take Thomas White after we took. So I don't know what the difference would have been with a shortstop. As far as the development of the player, so much work. And you know this because the amount of work we do behind the scenes and that our scouts do behind the scenes to get to know these players. If in the case of a Bobby Witt and a Gunnar Henderson, if you know those players well and you have them highly valued for the right reasons, I don't think anything would stop you from taking them. And you certainly wouldn't believe or think that it's going to delay one or the other's development. In fact, I've always thought this, and I've come to think about this even more. When you take the same of a certain, I've used the word archetype before, doesn't it just allow those players to have a peer? They have somebody that they can look at and say, he's like me. Thomas and Noble. In that case, it would be Bobby and Gunnar. And shouldn't they, as an athlete, you were an athlete, I was an athlete, shouldn't that propel them forward? So long as you got the evaluation right, that it's the right player, that he's got the right mindset, you believe in the competitive makeup, I would think that would propel the player forward.
So the iron sharpens iron.
Simply put.
Is it something? So did you consider, like, Thomas and Noble? Knowing Noble probably a bit more than Thomas, but Thomas, Phillips Andover kid, probably a little bit more cerebral. I think he was a huge SAT. I think he had over 1,500 SAT, if I remember correctly. Is it important to get guys, hey, we're going to pair these kind of together so they can go together, to have similar type personalities versus like, hey, this kid hates this guy and we just took both of them?
Yeah, there's a certain thing when if you want to get involved in athletes, if you're an organization, and this would, I guess, would apply to a college too. If you're a college that is recruiting a certain type of player because they excel at your school and they fit your culture, you probably, this recruiting game, this evaluation drafting game, it's so challenging that you need to commit to some things. You have to have some guardrails and commit to some things. So if you're in the athlete game, don't just try to take one. We've talked about this before. You try to take one. It's like picking a needle out of a haystack. So if you have your core set of values, plow right into it. And maybe it's just the Orioles constantly taking hitters. Iron sharpens iron. A lot of their hitters are doing well. For the Marlins, because of a lot of different reasons, our ballpark was not conducive to hitting historically. The draft is not conducive to huge droves of hitters coming out of any given draft. So when you combine those things, our strategies tilted towards pitching, and we took a lot of it. In the case of high school pitching, sure, the Blue Jays did that for years. Just keep taking high school pitching so that those players continue to evolve and grow together. So I like that. In the case of Thomas and Noble, Thomas was an easy pick because he was only one slot behind Noble on the draft board, I believe. If one was, and I don't have it in front of me, if one was 9 on our board, the other one was 11. I mean, they were right there. So by the time we got down deep in the draft, you were taking a player that you valued so high that all the other stuff went out the window and you just took the player.
It's always fascinating to me, like the the quantity quality situation. And I have a good friend, and I love getting information from guys who are out here, right? We have our biases because we played, we are right in tuned in it. We've been in professional baseball, collegiate baseball, the whole way up. I always love to get opinions of people who don't have those biases. Okay. So I had a friend who talked about, I asked him, what would you do in the draft? And it's like, I would attack pitching in quantity. Just get as many as you can and hope something works. And me being the former player, pitcher, more cerebral about it, I think about the mental process of that, right? Okay, we're grabbing all these guys. How do that affect each other? Because I think, especially with pitching, and we're going to talk about the high school class, the 2025 pitchers here in a second, which is what we're getting to. You end up going through pro ball in this little biodome, right? Whether you're in the Mariners or the Angels or the Dodgers or the D-backs or the Rangers, whoever it may be, you find yourself in this little tunnel of, hey, yes, I'm a big prospect. I was just a first rounder. The game speeds up in a hurry because that pond of first rounders, you're not comparing yourself to the other teams quite as much. Now you're in Arizona, in Florida,
Right.
training. Everybody looks good. And I always think about, what is that process? Is this guy going to be able to develop and succeed? And I'm sure you, as a scouting director, for the most part, you know, leading the charge. Hey, if this guy is not strong enough and strong-willed enough to do that, well, we shouldn't have taken him anyway. And that's an easy way to talk about it, but also placing the best opportunity for that player to succeed. Because in the end, we're giving a lot of money for this guy to do something at the big league level. How do we get them there? So it's something I'm passionate about, but I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Let me share a really specific example. And I do, you know, there's times when I don't want to talk about Marlins stuff specifically. Because I have perspectives that go way beyond the Marlins. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with international scouting. I've done pro scouting. I've done a whole bunch of different things. In this case, you bringing this up, I think I could share a really good example here. In 2022, we selected 2 high school right-handed pitchers. We selected Jacob Miller first, and we selected Carson Milbrandt second. One was in the second round, one was in the third round. In 2023, we selected Noble Meyer in the first round, and then we came back and we took Thomas White. Now, when you look at and I find this very interesting to your iron sharpens iron thing. You have 2 players in Jacob Miller who show up in the Jacob Miller and Carson Milbrandt. They show up in the organization. Carson Milbrandt, full disclosure, internally passes Jacob Miller. Why? We have our own narratives. We like the big velocity. We like the high verts, that kind of stuff. Got all the data on Milbrandt. He's bigger. He's stronger. So he edges up over Jacob Miller. Jacob Miller goes home in the offseason. He's not having it. Why? Because we knew Jacob Miller. We knew that he was highly competitive. Yep. We knew that the care level was high. That is not to diminish Carson Milbrandt. I liked Carson Milbrandt. Scouts like, organization likes him. Jacob went home, and who's in Double-A right now? Jacob Miller. So he jumped over. Now it's up to Carson to look at that as an athlete and push beyond. What happened in this previous season, or the season that's about to wrap up? You have 2 young players, both drafted extremely high. One drafted ahead of the other. They go through the first half of the season. They both go to the futures game. Noble Meyer's very good. Thomas White's very good. They get pushed hard to high A in their first full season as high school players. Thomas White has clearly moved ahead of Noble Meyer. We're not going to get too granular. Just look at the numbers. What is Noble Meyer going to do? And as an organization, you believe in Noble Meyer. You believe in Carson Milbrandt, and you're hoping that this whole competitive athleticism thing, these players together are moving forward. And make no mistake, Jacob Miller and Carson Milbrandt also know that Noble Meyer and Thomas White are coming together. So as an organization, you've casted a big net. You've got 4 really good pitching prospects. One of them is going to probably be an absolute monster. The other one's going to be good. One might be a really good reliever. And as an organization, you become really, really excited about the depth that you have.
I love that the mindset too. And we'll move on here in a second. but the mindset, and I always felt like, hey, the team mindset. But in the end, you have to, I don't want to call it a selfish mindset, more of a tunnel vision, right? To your story there, Thomas can't be worried about Noble. Noble can't be worried about Thomas. Carson, those guys can't worry. Hey, I'm worried about myself, and we can get into the mental side of things on some future episodes. But like, you can't be looking to those peripherals, whether you're hitting, whether you're pitching. And I think that's one of the bigger important things in building an organization, because you're trying to build the unity of the organization, right? The Twins way, the Yankees way, we all do it this. In the end, hey, my Josh Donaldson mindset, I need to be doing this. Bryce Harper, Mike Trout, hey, I am going in this line with me, which will help the team. And I think especially from a pitcher standpoint, that's most important.
I think that there is this like healthy selfishness that exists for all players, for all athletes. If you don't have a healthy amount of selfishness in you, you probably aren't the best competitor. That's just not how athletics works. At the same time, you would hope that the relationships evolve to where those players move into AA and AAA, and they can envision themselves anchoring a major league staff. And then they can one day look back and say, man, remember when we were in Beloit? Remember that time we were in Clinton and we were freezing our butts off? And man, I had 2 or 3 bad outings in a row, and you were there to help me with my changeup, and they all emerged. They're all not going to be as impactful as the other guy, but together that can be a really impactful group. And I think when you're drafting players and selecting players, understanding what your organization values is a major hurdle to overcome, because sometimes people can't define those things. But if you can define what you value and you select a big group of players, you just give yourself the best chance to get as many big league players as possible. No different than the Orioles just keep plowing into hitting.
Yep.
They haven't developed any pitching. Nobody's staring at the Orioles and saying, now, I really liked the Jackson Baumeister pick last year. We were all over that. I would have loved to have Jackson Baumeister. But generally speaking, they went a different route. They've plowed into the hitting. So all of those hitters will end up growing together and being part of the Orioles' future.
Well, I'd love to bring back the starting pitchers. I would love to bring back those Oakland A's cover Sports Illustrated 5 guys. We got Mulder, Zito, Tim Hudson, all over. But I do want to talk about the pitching in this 2025 class. And you had a busy summer. I was getting after on the summer trail with it as well. The big takeaway, and it was, I would call it a very unique summer, because the best pitcher in the class threw approximately 5 innings.
Yes.
Seth Hernandez hopped on the mound, and he is the top arm in this class. And I thought what he did when I saw him at USA, he comes into a game, and I think it was like the 8th inning. It was a wild situation, because he did like the runner on second base. They were kind of doing a mock inning, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this is maybe a quarter of this kid's summer innings, and we're going to do like a little bunt situation, which was fascinating for our purposes here. But the effortless 97 to 100 that comes out of that kid's hand. And what I want to ask you, because you got to see him out of area codes, he's up to 100 there. He's not crisp. You're walking in as a scouting director. I would say at least half of those guys are hearing Seth Hernandez's name for the first time. Now, maybe more know him because Schiefelbein, they had a really good couple guys drafted off that Corona team. He's high profile. He had thrown 70+ innings, was dominant throughout the spring. How did that one singular moment for you present Seth Hernandez to the upper echelon of decision makers?
Yeah, so you know going in that he's supposed to be a guy. Some scouting directors, to your point, good one, they probably ran into him at some point in the spring. I don't know how much they bared down on him. They could have been down the side, but for some of us, that was our first look. And when you see a guy come out in the first inning and it's 98 to 100, it's hard to unsee that. It's hard to, you can't forget that. And your mind immediately starts going to other players historically that may have had moments like that. So as soon as you start having to wonder, have I ever seen anybody do this? He's already becomes in rarefied air. Yes. And that's without knowing that he pitch. You don't even know if he can pitch. You don't know if he has any breaking stuff. You don't know if he can command the baseball. You don't know if you don't know all of those types of things, but he's already put himself in a very, very unique class of pitcher. So of course you leave excited about it.
So for him, and I think it's important for anybody listening with the draft, a lot of times when we're separating these guys and we have them tiered out, we will hopefully in the future do a little more public presentation with that. Seth Hernandez, immediately, my one look was like, yep, slam dunk. I just watched all these arms. This guy's different. One, he's uber athletic. He's 6'4", 190. It's still growing into his frame. But his ability to repeat and just look that silky smooth, that's what's paramount to me. It also helps the fact that he hit in the 3-hole for Corona, the national champion. He is athletic. Yep. He played, I go back to that USA. He also took pregame in and out in right field before coming into that game. So there is the athleticism. But what I'm getting to is we start evaluating him at a different level, right? He's no longer being, the rest of this 25. No, he's being compared to Jackson Jobe. He's being compared to Noble Meyer. Where does he stand on that Noble Meyer scale? Can he be a number 3 pick? Is he that type of guy like Jackson Jobe? Boom. What did you see? Yes or no? Jackson Jobe. Is he that guy?
I think, and I think that's where your mind goes. That's what I was alluding to. If I didn't articulate that well, he's already crossed the threshold of first rounder. Mm-hmm. You don't really need to talk about that anymore. Whether he's the 20th overall pick, the 25th overall pick, the 5th overall pick, your mind as a scouting director, as an organization, goes to, how does he make it into the elite group of high school pitcher? Does he have enough of that? So what's your checklist? And every team is different. There are teams that would not have selected Jackson Jobe because they didn't like his vert. He's out. That's a guardrail. We're not doing it. He's older. He doesn't have a missed fastball. Next. That's it. Specifically, I'm talking high up the board. There are teams that would 100% have not selected Noble Meyer. He didn't have a missed fastball. So as an organization, like I was mentioning before, you have to decide what your guardrails are and what's important to you with that cohort of player, with that pitching group of players. And it is a very, very select group where a guy would be a consensus pick. The other part that we mentioned before is like pitchers going wire to wire, these little checkpoints and reminders that you have. Can you imagine Seth Hernandez going wire to wire? What do I mean by wire to wire? He's clearly the consensus best pitcher in the draft. Can we talk about players in the past who were the consensus best pitcher in the draft, and then 10-year high school pitchers I'm talking about, and 10 years later we look up and he's still the best? Clayton Kershaw? I don't know. Like Josh Beckett? Kerry Wood, and what made those players unique? Because what you're not trying to do with a high school right-handed pitcher is just get a starter. Of course, he's already crossed that threshold. Yeah. He is a first rounder. You do think he's going to be a starter. Now you get to be a little bit more precise and picky with what specifically his profile is going to be and who he most favorably compares to that may have shared those attributes.
It's putting it fiscally, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're probably way more in tune to this, but the way that I usually look at it, and there's a certain tier, right? So like 800K to 1.5 million. Hey, this is a group of guys where you're sitting here. If you want to sign for $1 million, there's probably a nice chunk of high school right-handers. Now to go from 1.5 to 3, hey, you're moving up into a higher status to be that 1.5 to 3. 3 plus, you're talking about maybe 2 prep right-handers, maybe 3 in a good year. So like that's just for anybody who's really, and I would think most agencies are very much locked in, most analytical departments, scouting departments know that well, but just in the mainstream, like that's where you're moving that dial. And you can think about those guys who got over 3 million on the right-handed side, and you can probably rip them off pretty quickly the last 5-6 years. But is that fair to say that's kind of the financial status of these guys?
Yeah, I think it is. And, for people that are watching, listening, that haven't listened to the episode we did, gosh, that was months ago, wasn't it, Shooter? One of our first episodes. I really, really enjoyed it. And I think it was contextualized by what the 2024 draft offered. Most of the players fit down there. And we talked about some real granular types of things, some historical things that drove pitchers. This elite group up here, you're talking about Seth Hernandez. He's right-handed. We're going to get to Appenzeller in a little bit as a left-hander. Next year, we're talking about Gio Rojas, that kind of thing. These elite players. You're talking about them in the context of history. Is it is this going to be Clayton Kershaw? Does this guy have the pitchability and the command to become Zach Greinke? Does he have, if he doesn't have quite the vert and TrackMan stuff we want to see in his heater, is it elite enough to become Jackson Jobe with Jackson's slider that carried him and Jackson's athleticism and his bloodlines from his family and all those kind of things? Those are the types of things, because don't forget, we're talking about prep guys, but he's also going to have to beat out Jace Laviolette. He's also going to have to beat out who from Florida State? Jamie Arnold. Polished stuff. He's going to have to beat out Tyler Bremner. That's where this guy's competing.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's the way you speak. Actually, you said Greinke there. I'm thinking Zach Wheeler, the ease of operation of Hernandez and Wheeler are kind of similar. Different, I would say different analytics on the fastball right now, which Hernandez, that fastball, guys kind of got to it this summer, which, I mean, again, these were 4 innings this poor kid threw. He's awesome. But let's move down to this next year, just because we're going to talk ad nauseum about Seth Hernandez the next year, and we'll kind of move him around the first round, I'm sure. But guys like Angel Cervantes, who's our second-ranked right-hander, Justice DeYoung, and Matthew Fisher, those are 3 guys, and you got to see them kind of gut feel guys. And now let me break them down before you talk about them, what you saw. Cervantes, ultra competitor, LA kid, 2-time All-American for us, real feel for the zone, multiple breaking balls, up close to 3,000 spin, good changeup, starter profile. He's actually gotten stronger, which I think the frame will continue to trend up. Justice Young, one of the youngest kids in the draft, 2-way potential. Love those athletes. He's a New York kid, goes to Poly Prep, real good arsenal, competitive kid who can also swing it. And then Matthew Fisher, who's also QB1. I don't know if I sent you that. Probably a big reason why he's not coming to our All-American game is that he'll be playing Friday nights. But his ease of operation, they look like starters. And I think more than just the velocity, and we can get into the radar gun, who can start? There's so much value into, can this guy go through multiple times around a lineup? Can we build this guy into something that is ultra valuable? What is valuable? Starting pitching. So what did you have on those 3 guys this summer?
Well, 2 of the guys are a little bit more similar. One of the guys, not as much. All of them very, very good. You know, and I didn't have much history with Cervantes. And what appeared to be, you know, I use this word, and I always say this respectfully, because sometimes the boring good guys are the best players. They're the most, what do we say in baseball? You've got to be consistent. We got to know what you're going to get. That was the vibe that Cervantes gave you when I saw him at the area codes. You didn't sit there and get lit up by the stuff. But then all of a sudden there was 5 punch outs and the inning was over. And you're like, wow, he just navigated those. He pitched against the Reds. He just navigated that really, really easily. And as much as we can say in these short stints that these pitchers go out and try to execute, and we think about what are they trying to show the scouting community, this guy went out there, he was comfortable in his own skin, he repeated his delivery, and all of a sudden there were 5 punch outs. Velocity's fine, 91, 93, spins his breaking ball, everything's for strikes, starter all the way. Ceiling becomes a question as you move forward with Cervantes. What's the projection going to be? Or is this one of these things like he is what he is? Is that what scouts are going to say? Or is there another level that this player can reach given his off-season training? As it stands right now, he kind of looked like a college guy as far as just he can pitch. He can throw strike.
I don't know if you remember a kid, Eric Silva, who came out of Southern California probably about 3-ish years ago, kind of similar mover, ability for spin. I'm not sure how Silva's doing. It's interesting with all these guys because we talk about the fastball metrics all the time. And I think of Owen Hall, kid who went this year. I think the Tigers took him crazy.
Yeah, Oklahoma, out of Oklahoma.
Yeah, Oklahoma kid, crazy fastball metrics. Is he going to start? But I think for a lot of teams, right, that fastball, we're going to see what we can get here because there's so much explosion in it. I don't know if Cervantes has that type of fastball. We'll see what comes of the summer. A lot comes into the makeup, especially these 3 we're talking about right here. Cervantes, tough kid. He turns into a different person between the white lines, which is awesome. But dive into Justice DeYoung, who was kind of a slow spring where he maybe some tendon, I don't know, didn't throw much this spring. Comes back later in the summer. You got to see him. We're going to see him again in Miami here. What did you like from him throughout the summer?
Man, you know, like DeYoung was fun to watch, and it started at East Coast Pro. He went to both events, so I had the opportunity. And some guys aren't the same at each of the events.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what you're going to get. They're fairly short innings. The best way I can describe DeYoung is when I showed up in Long Beach, I couldn't wait for him to get on the mound. You know, the Yankees are running out their guys, and I'm like, hey, when's DeYoung going to get out there? I really enjoyed seeing him pitch. And he makes it really easy on you. We talked about Eli Willits the other day. You say, well, why do you bring up a shortstop? Eli Willits made it really easy to like him right away. When DeYoung walked out of the dugout at East Coast Pro, and he did what he did, pitching in the mid 90s, breaking ball, everything for strike, any count, heavy level of compete. You know that he can swing the bat, that he's an athlete. You know he's young, right?
Yes.
You know he's young, and he does what he does at East Coast Pro. You just can't wait to see him at area codes. And I don't know if he one-upped himself at area codes. He might have. He was equally as impressive. It was really, really good. So, you know, with a guy like DeYoung, you look at the body, you look at the now stuff, you look at the ability to throw strikes and compete. You layer on top of that age and athleticism, the fact that he's a hitter. There's a whole bunch of really good things to like about.
How does that age come into it? Because if you're looking at it, if he could easily be in the 26 class, yeah, I think he's a year younger than Seth Hernandez, who is still 18 at draft. But like, is there anything that would affect you there? If you're thinking in your head, going in the room, yeah, hey, we like Justice in the supplemental, right? You're a Northeast area guy. We like him in the supplemental round. I'll put him here. What if it was next year? Envision him a year from now. What if he's 95 to 98? Well, we just is that something that would go through your head as a director? Like, hey, this guy's here, or is that strictly analytics are telling you how much to value the age?
I think I would probably just keep it simple. He's 17 years old. He's 17 years old and he's really good. There's times when I get really deep in the weeds on things, but when a player does what he did and he impresses at that level, then he's just the 17-year-old that's better than everybody else. It's just what it is, you know? So he was probably, if we how about this? He was more impressive than Seth Hernandez. Now that might sound bold. Doesn't mean that I would put him ahead of Seth Hernandez, but when you think about the players that you watched over the summer that did things that made you want to watch them, this guy did a lot of things that made you want to watch him. Threw strikes in big moments, showed you the ability to pitch with a heater. It was just really, really good. You know, his spin rates are high. He's like 2,600 up there with his breaking ball or fastball higher. He can spin it. The compete level was there. So
do something. I think that's let's tag that line. Do something that makes somebody want to watch you. And that's not like wearing the swag, but it's interesting about each of these guys, like the upside of that, like Justice DeYoung, and just to go into the process of, I guess, ranking these guys. Kid from the Northeast, hasn't thrown quite as much, lower mileage, two-way, young for the class. Yep. These are all things that go into building this board. Similar to Matthew Fisher, who quarterback, absolute strike thrower. Everything he did was easy. And going to the summer, he's one of the guys where I thought could grab some helium. I'm streaming the East Coast Pro. You're there, and I'm watching like, holy crap, this kid's awesome. Like, and you know how it goes. East Coast Pro every year, like guys weren't throwing strikes, a lot to the backstop, a lot of whatever it is. This kid came in and pumped, and all of a sudden he's done with the game. He's heading back for 7-on-7s, doing his thing. What did you have on Matthew Fisher, who is older for the class? And talk a little bit about that and how that ties into things.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as opposed to the guy we just talked about, right? This guy's a lot older. Mm-hmm. Does that matter? Well, it didn't seem to matter for Jackson Jobe. He was a little bit older, you know. The thing is most young high school pitchers don't throw a lot of strikes, and you got to think about, all right, is he just trying to show me stuff? Can he pitch? Those kind of things. With a guy like Fisher, yes, you're correct. He is older, but I don't think it should limit your excitement for the guy, because on top of being older, he's also a hell of an athlete. To your point on QB1, this was one of the more impressive outings of all the pitchers this summer. It was 6 up. It was 6 down. I don't know how many pitches he threw, but it wasn't a lot. It was really easy for him to go out there and pitch at 91 to 93 with a breaking ball, punch a bunch of guys off and walk off the mound and just be done with it. It was really good. It was mound presence. He's strong. It's, starter all the way. Do you have to consider the 20-year-old part or the 19 to 20? Yeah, sure. You got to consider that. But if you think the player's good enough, it didn't affect the Phillies. They took Dante Nori right this year with their first pick. The Detroit Tigers took Jackson Jobe, didn't seem to affect them. Aiden Miller, wasn't he a little older?
A little bit, yeah. He's
so I look at these guys, if their level of skill is higher and you think you're going to be able to push them a little bit more, then it wouldn't affect me. And I think on Fisher, from the brief 3-inning look that I got, wouldn't affect me that much at all. He's really talented.
I guess the beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? If you like him, you start building a case for the fact that, he's a football player, less mileage there, right? It doesn't matter. He's 19.6, but baseball wise, he's only 17. Like, is that something, if you like him?
Yeah. Isn't that what we're doing with Alec Blair from Northern Cal, the outfielder, Oklahoma, like a super, might be a McDonald's All-American basketball player. You can't say that he's a polished baseball player yet. But for us that like Alec Blair, what are we leaning into? Hasn't had as much time at the plate. Same thing here with Fisher. You picked out a couple players here that were some of the most impressive, from Cervantes and his pitchability and what you're getting right now to this upside stuff with DeYoung and there's some others, but with Fisher and Young, I mean, these are some of the most impressive, certainly with Fisher. I don't want to minimize Cervantes, but with Fisher and DeYoung, these guys made it look really, really easy, and they did it with athleticism.
Again, we've talked about it ad nauseum. The separation is not so big, right? These guys are getting in the tiers because there'll be a chance to move. So moving down below those guys, like a guy like Aaron Watson, everything just comes so easy, right? The fastball comes out of the hand, repeats really well. And these guys kind of are in a bunch. And I'll kind of list them right here real quick, DJ, because Rhett the Jet's going to throw up the image on the screen for this. But Billy Carlson, who two-way we've talked about, he is one of the top arms. It's one of those nice fallback plans for Billy Carlson, whatever scouting director's going that way. Reed Worley can really spin it, starter profile. Georgia kid, Kennesaw commit. Landon Harmon, who you start talking about metrics of fastballs. I mean, he's got to be in the top 3 in this class right now, 96 and 98. There's some serious sizzle in that thing. It's one of the more fun fastballs that I saw this summer. We'll see him down in Miami. Josh Hammond, who becomes an intriguing two-way guy. Is he a reliever? Can he start? Don't want to put anything past a kid who competes at that level. Nico Partita, put him in the same light. I think Nico Partita is probably, if I had to go into the spring, who's your gut take? Who's going to take Nico Partita? For 3 years, he's been an absolute baller. Shout out to Brandon Goins, our guy in Texas, where every time we sit down to rank, right? 6'4" Texas, the Jace Lavalette, all those guys. Nico Partita is that dude. He's at Pearland. He's led them to win. He's been that dude since sophomore, freshman year. He's a two-way, hops on the mound up to 97. Huge fan of his. Marcos Paz would have been challenging Seth Hernandez in this class. So I doubt you know much about him, but he went.
I didn't see Partita or Paz. So
Paz has Tommy John.
I'm getting excited. Listen about those guys.
Well, you know what? Let me dive into Paz for a second, because outstanding on the national circuit. He was a guy who was in our top 10 nationally. Would have had a chance to challenge Seth Hernandez. I saw him last summer, and in my notes I said this guy would very easily go into AA today with the stuff that you saw, the ease of operation, the amount of strikes with multiple pitches. This guy we could throw out in AA. Tommy John, how does that affect his value? And would it make it the teams who are able to see what he did in those 2 years as an underclassman, would that help him? Man.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I got involved in that in 2020, which was a strange draft when we did Dax Fulton.
Okay.
He was a Tommy John guy, and unfortunately he came back and he ended up blowing out again. He's almost back at this point. I saw some video of him recently. He looked really good. Man, I wish I had an answer for you on that one, and I hate saying I don't know. What I do know is some teams will, let's go back to our guardrails. They'll just set it up and go, I don't want to do that. We're just going to take college bat. Take college arm. It might really, really bug some teams.
But those riverboat gamblers.
Well, let me ask you this. What's the difference? What's the difference if you take Paz, who's coming back, right? Who's the other guy we like? The ultra projection guy from Dripping Springs, Tracy, coming back from Tommy John, left-hander, right? What's the difference if you take him or you take Painter, who's going to blow out? I mean, it did blow out. You know what I'm saying? Like we're at this point. So it's a it's a lengthy conversation. This is probably a conversation where we should bring somebody on and talk about this, because they talk about what's the shelf life of Tommy John. You know, Paz, is he now on the clock because he's already fixed it? What would you rather have? Potato? I don't know. But I think this is part of the reason why you see so few teams will back out of the high school pitchers, and they don't want to get involved in it. So when one guy has a Tommy John, we were just talking about fastball problems. Well, Aaron Watson, I happen to really like Aaron Watson. Got up Jacksonville, Florida. He looks like a sinker slider guy. If you think you're going to go in there and watch him throw 94 to 96 and just throw it by guys, that's probably not your speed. You're not going to see that. This guy throws the ball in the strike zone. He does it really easy, the operation. So again, you start setting up guardrails. If Watson isn't your speed, or if a guy with Tommy John isn't your speed, then you just have to pass on these kind of players. I didn't like to do that. I didn't like to eliminate prospects like that because there's not enough of them out there. So if they are unique in the case of Watson with sinker, slider, I'm in. If you get to know him, who was the guy the Braves took a few years ago from Texas? Another Tommy John guy. I think it happened in the spring. San Antonio area. It's slipping my mind.
San Antonio throws hard. Everybody throws hard in San Antonio.
I know. Oh, even the guy. How about the guy from the Breakthrough? I don't want to get off track here. The guy from the Breakthrough that I said it was really he was really good. Caleb Rogers. You know, you're not expecting anything from the Breakthrough team, and he comes out and he just dominates. He's really, really good. So,
and he's a small frame, which we love him too. He's another winner. And he'll get to go on. I believe he's at Case and Cunningham school. So oh man, if he's not, I'm going to get crushed for that. But I believe they're together, which will probably only help him.
So as we're talking about this, you know, outside of the individual players, something that would be, you know, that you think about when you're setting up this, we talked about your roadmap. The guardrails for position players are fairly tight because you want to make sure you don't get anchored into something. If you start to bail on a position player, it makes it very, very difficult on an organization, because the reality is they don't change much. Can they change? Yes, absolutely. A position player can change, but you would rather have them change in the positive way. When you go plowing into a position player and then you try to back out of it in the spring, it makes it very, very challenging on an organization. Conversely, it's a lot looser with these pitchers because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what kind of pitch design or pitch development Aaron Watson's going to go through this coming offseason. You don't know what he's going to look like once he comes back. So what you try to do with the pitchers is you're a little bit more aggressive going in, and you know that they're going to have to show you because we haven't seen much of them. You know, we're lucky to have seen 6 innings. We're lucky to have seen 6 innings out of DeYoung and do what he did in a brief, whatever that means, 6-inning stint. But these pitchers will have to post, and you want to be there. You're a little bit more aggressive. So when they ring the bell in February or March, whenever these high school seasons start, you are at, and when I say you, not just the area scouts for these teams, the cross checkers need to be hyper aware of, we need to be at Landon Harmon. We need to see what Paz looks like when he comes back. We need to be at DeYoung once the weather breaks, and so on and so. We talk about John Paoni. Is that how you say his name? Up in Massachusetts, or I think he's at Lawrence Academy. You know, you got to make sure that you're prepared to be at those games when the bell rings. You're a little more aggressive.
It's interesting you say that with the pitching, and kind of having done this now for close to 10 years with freshmen right on up through the seniors. And I was evaluating recently, like, what is the value for a pro team? And I think pitching wise, I don't know how much underclass value there is. You want to check in on the top guys. So like a guy like Seth Hernandez, you want to check in on anybody who I think may have a chance to reclass, especially start identifying those guys. But because of the pitch design and the ability to make advancements, and I think pitching, even more so than the hitting, is difficult to put them in order. It's a huge reason for us rankings wise why, hey, it's very rare you're going to see a high school right hand or a prep right-hander in the top 10, right? It's going to be maybe one. Maybe there's Noble Meyer. Maybe there's a Mick Abel. Maybe there's an Andy Payne, whatever that may be.
It's a restricted group. It's hard to get into that group.
It's very hard, but it's also, I mean, look into the big leagues. Guys make jumps at different times, and
Right.
none of the development is linear. And I think that's a huge importance for anybody listening, going through, scanning the rankings. Like, we really like a lot of these guys. And just because they're not in the top, how is this guy not in the top 10? He throws 100 miles an hour. Well, like, we're still identifying, is this guy going to be able to make a jump? And I mean, this next
Can he
group
log
here,
innings? Can he complete games? Can he pitch
Yes.
deep into a game in a high school game? Can he? How about as simply as this? You go and you watch a high school player. Hey, shooter, did he dominate? Because he should.
Yeah.
Because a high school player should, a high school pitcher should. I don't think I need to explain what dominate means. He needs to dominate. That's what the elite high school players do. The elite high school pitchers do. And you know what else they do? They give you 6 or 7 innings every time out.
Yeah.
Every time out. There's a compete level to them. They're not just trying to throw hard. They want to show you all the different things that they can do. Doesn't mean that they're a finished product. It just means that they want to show you those things, and they will in the spring, but you have to give them the chance to by being there.
Yeah, it's probably, and it's definitely a mindset. And I also, maybe the potential one caveat, like where the kid's playing, the league, like I strike out, like rolling out of bed in certain places in 5 innings, you roll out of bed striking out 10.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my mindset, high school, and shoot, even into college for me. Like, I am throwing a no-hitter until somebody gets a hit in this game. I have a no-hitter. Like, that was my mindset. And I'm sure for most of these kids, like, that's why I think, I know your competition. You should. Nico Partita, he plays really good teams. Seth Hernandez, they're playing real dudes. So, like, there are certain guys on here, hey, there's numbers you got to hit. But to go on, like, this next group, Jordan Martin, who will be at the All-American game, super projectable. Talk about another guy who can really hoop. I think his upside, his best days are ahead of him. CJ Gray is one of the more intriguing arms in this class. And 24 was not the best year for North Carolina. Probably, I mean, shoot, if you're going on the average, it was definitely a below average prep year in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
CJ Gray, who's another big time quarterback, so he won't be seen during the fall.
Multi-sport, yeah.
Explosive. I actually talked to Brandon Hall. I said, hey, it's not too dissimilar than like a guy like Chase Petty. Like the way he moves, there is some absolute electricity in that arm. Petty's also kind of scuffled with the slider a little bit. He's outstanding, but like Gray's in that mold. Sorry, go ahead.
So that's an example. He wasn't an East Coast pro.
No.
How does a guy not like that not show up at East Coast pro? Is he a little bit raw? Yes, he's a little bit raw. That's fine. It was the second or third night you and I were sitting at NPI when he came in. It was in the evening, and he came in throwing just absolute rockets, 95, 96, athletic. Yeah, he needs some delivery work. There's a little bit of effort and there's this and that, but there's probably a lot of teams that don't even know who that guy is. Or certainly cross-checkers that haven't seen him because of the way that we've talked about the schedule, the calendar. Player like that may not have been seen by regional, national guys, and there might be an area scout out there going, hey, and this is where area scouts are important. If I'm an area scout and I know that guy wasn't at East Coast Pro or he didn't make the Nationals team for area codes or he wasn't able to get here or get there, you got to know who that guy is. It's athlete and it's a big arm.
Allow me to give the first public invite. CJ Gray, you have an invite to Super 60, February 2nd, Sunday in Chicago. Brandon Hall, sorry. Mason Pike, another two-way guy who metrically, and I love the makeup of Mason Pike. I still think his upside, like he's not even a guy who really, I think, considers pitching his deal yet, but it was some serious fuego when I got to see him in July. I think he is again.
He's up to 7. He was up to 97 at the area code games.
And metrically, I think he's gonna be able to spin it. I think his best days are ahead of him. So the guys who get in, and I love these. Obviously, I have some Pacific Northwest bias at this point because I see those guys a fair amount. But Cooper Rummel, especially when we go into our ranking process, who always blows up in the spring? For us, we're always talking about who in Texas is going to blow up because it happens every single year. Cooper Rummel just bullies guy. He looks like the big 12-year-old on the mound, and he goes through his simple delivery, and he just backspins the heck out of fastballs and throws it by guys at the top of the zone. Ethan Bioto is another guy pushing in, but I want to get to probably the most I've said it too many times, most polarizing. But Miguel Samay is extremely polarizing. He's on the same high school team as Justice DeYoung. They also have a great underclassman, Hinojosa, who's on that staff, which should be outstanding this year. I can't wait to get out to Poly, get a couple square slices in Brooklyn, maybe a bagel or two. But Miguel Sime, who's throwing 100, to me, like there's a fair amount of effort in there. Is he going to land the breaking ball? Can this guy start? But he gets into a tier where, hey, this guy has what I call unteachableness. Hey, he's got something special that is outlier, that has a chance to be super explosive. He's going into this tier. His floor has been set there. There is value above that floor. What do you think with Sime? What are you thinking? Are teams split on him? Where would they stand?
I could see where they're split. There's not a great breaking ball. The spin's not great on the breaking ball or the fastball. You get this feeling watching him. And I saw him 3 times. I saw him at East Coast Pro, saw him at Area Codes, and I saw him at that All-American game in San Diego. And interestingly enough, I started to warm up a little bit more and more to this guy the more I watched him pitch. And I think, you use the word unteachableness. And after you see the whole class and you start thinking about the things that are valuable, you can't teach the way he looks. He's big, he's strong, and he's got a heck of an arm. What you'd want to know is, what is he around? What's the development curve look like for this player? What type of pitching coach has he been around? Has he really been taught how to spin the ball? Has he been exposed to technology? These are all the kind of things. That's why you can't, you're aggressive with this guy going into the year so that you give yourself a chance to do the work in the offseason to see if he's going to be able to make some jumps. If he doesn't make those jumps, well, then you reserve the right to maybe just walk away and call him the arm strength guy, but you can't just push him aside when you got that kind of body and that kind of raw arm strength.
It's so interesting. Again, I keep going back to the difficulty with the prep pitching, and the fact a guy like that, like, oh, he hit these guys, he's walking these guys, but all of a sudden it kind of clicks a little bit in the spring of 25, and you almost forget about what happened in 24 and 23 and 22, and you just see that. And I think sometimes you can be overseen. And, and again, going back to that prospect fatigue.
Prospect fatigue, scout fatigue. It's just, you've seen it so much. I think that's a real thing. It's a real.
Let me compare it, just because we're going down the list, and like there's some explosiveness here. There's guys who are going to move, but like a guy like Noah Yoder, crazy fastball versus Sime. So Sime, Yoder, those are some crazy fastballs.
Yeah. I mean, you and I talked about Yoder. He's going to have to fix some things in his delivery. If he does, you can't teach 100. He's up in that rarefied air of elite stuff. So
it's paying for whiffs. A lot of awesome guys on this list with a chance to start. Continue to go through, like Eston Simpson. I think he's got a ton of upside. River Hamilton's an Oregon kid, kind of an up and down summer. I have gotten to see him probably at his best, which is why I'm probably on the higher end of anybody with him, but I love the way he competes. Grady Westfall for me is the guy where I'm circling, like, can this be Aaron Crow?
Slider. Good slider.
Can that slider turn into like the Aaron Crow disgustingness? There were some little tweaks, and I don't want to step into the player development side, but like little things for me where I was like, if this kid from August until February, he could easily come out and you're like, wow, because he's got a secret weapon, right? If that slider turns into what I think it can be, and he does a nice job with the changeup, his really athletic kid, athletic family, his brother's one of the best players in the 27 class. I think that the ceiling is just really high in what he can become. And there's a whole list of guys below him right now where I think they're in that mix too. Hey, there's a huge jump. You talked about Peony, who's, up to 96, super easy, square shouldered. This guy fits the mold. Can't wait to go see him. But there's so much to get excited about. And we have to be the top prep right-handed guys right now. You and I just love them.
It's why, when we talk about like the things that scouts are doing throughout the course of the year, we know what they're doing in the spring. There is a lot of work to be done in the off season. Right now, I would suspect that most of the scouts in these organizations have turned their attention to what's happening on these college campuses. So they're going to be running around some of the small schools, the NII schools, peeking in on Alabama or LSU and seeing some high follows and whatnot. But they have to be paying attention to what's going on with Miguel Sim. You have to be paying attention to what's going on with Westfall. Is his body changing? What's his offseason program? Again, so that you're prepared to go into next spring and not be behind, because when you're behind, it's just hard to play catch up with high school pitchers. They're already fighting an uphill battle. I know we like them, but collectively as an industry, they're fighting an uphill battle, these high school guys. So you want to be ahead of it by knowing exactly what they're doing to prepare for their season so that you're the team that said, yeah, we saw this coming. We know the player, we saw it coming. We know the work you put in.
And I'm excited to see that kind of work. It's one of the big reasons why I love the Super 60, where, hey, you're not making $1 trillion here at the Super 60, but you're booking travel tickets to a lot of important decision makers, and you're showing off stuff where Blake Walters can elevate himself, Cash Mayfield, Chris Lavonis, all guys who are able to elevate themselves because they show their off-season development, and now they punch tickets for decision makers, scouting directors,
right.
cross-checkers.
So it's no different, Shooter, than the player development departments. Once these players get into professional baseball, interacting with the players, staying engaged with the players as they're going through their offseason. So when they show up, wow, we're not surprised that Jacob Miller's making a jump. We're not surprised that, and it could be a college guy too, is going to make this jump. You're engaged when the scouts are engaged, and player development departments need to be engaged.
I've seen so much more of that. Let's shift over to these ever coveted southpaws and the left-handed arms. I'm just going to roll through our top 5 right now. Cameron Appenzeller, Illinois left-hander. Caden Crowell out of Indiana. We'll get into him a bit. Johnny Slowinski from Texas. Cruz Schoolcraft at 4, an Oregon product. And then Eli Blair out of Florida. He's a Panhandle kid. For us, especially at the top, that the Cam Appenzeller,
oh gosh,
it just really separated himself. You talked about the guys like it's kind of boring. His boring outings were outstanding. Hey, he hasn't his best stuff today. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
He was so good. Easy. I think I told you, maybe it was, I don't know if it's bold. Who knows? I don't know. It's still kind of early. Can this guy challenge Seth Hernandez as the best high school pitching prospect in the country? I know he's got to get a little bit stronger. We'd like to see that. But we can say that for any number of these high school players because they all have to get a little bit stronger. If this guy gets a little stronger and his stuff ticks up just a little bit, man, it's going to be hard not to take him.
Well, when
because he does a lot that you talk about unteachableness.
Yeah.
You know, this guy already throws strikes and commands the ball, and he's got good enough stuff. You're just looking for a little uptick there to lean into. He was really impressed. That was my first time seeing him was at Area Codes.
You talk about that him versus Seth, like you also talk about positionality of it and the profile. Hey, he's a left-handed starter. Like that profile automatically goes on top of a guy like Seth Hernandez's right-handed profile. So I think there is clearly a path there. Excellent golfer, which I did not know. He's on the golf team.
That kid was really good. You bring up positionality. You might be looking at the draft board next year going, listen, we love Seth Hernandez, but there isn't anything that looks like Appenzeller down the board, and we love Appenzeller. So we're taking him. Heck, the Royals took Mazzucato. Where'd they take Mazzucato? 7, 6. Like, come on. Like, this guy is really, really talented. And again, you provide some context and some color talking about his golf game. We learn more about his family, what his development curve is, what type of athleticism he has. There's just a lot of really good things to like about Cam. So.
I mean, dude's a bucket on the hardwood too. The first highlights I was watching of him was him flushing some serious dunks on guys. So love that about him. Again, cold weather guy, limited innings. Caden Crowell, the same light. There's some serious baseball background, bloodlines, really good athlete. He and Slowinski are kind of the two pushes for us, I would say right here. It's the ease of operation, the fact that they throw multiple secondaries, 4 strikes. There is a full arsenal. With an off season, the ability to find that path towards a jump is there because of the ease of operation. The arms really work. You'll get a chance to see both those guys again at the All-American game. I don't think you've seen Slowinski yet because he was kind of a unique summer to him, but very excited for that. Cruz Schoolcraft right below those guys. Another unique southpaw. He's a reclass, so younger for the class now. I think he's like 18-3 for the draft. Up to 97. I got to see him dominate in Oregon all spring. Explosive fastball, good changeup. Spin is coming along. He is like 6'8", bigger than these guys, so I think there's some differential. He, to me, we've been talking, is very like Travis Sakura. So is it Sakura?
Sakura, yeah.
It's
who took him? The Washington Nationals took Sakura.
Shoot, he's doing really well right now. But like there was almost a prospect fatigue with him because he's always going out there. Is this going to work? Hey, it has worked. Really good athlete. Sakura actually swung it really well, just like Cruz does. I think there's clearly an earlier day one type chance for a guy like Cruz Schoolcraft. He's going to be throwing bullying fastballs throughout the spring. Does that secondary jump? Can we envision him being a starter? That's going to be stuff to consider. But it comes out so easy.
And I like he started. Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish that.
It almost feels like there's more velo on the way, which is scary to think.
Man, he was 92 to 96 at area codes. And you kind of forgot the fact that he doesn't really have a breaking ball. And then I saw him play, get more ABs than I did see him pitch. Now, that's not to say that I think he's a hitter, but in this day and age of POs, and it's always impressive when you see guys do this. Spencer Jones did that in high school. Our boy with the Giants now, Eldridge, did that in high school. There's something to these guys that are some version of a prospect on both sides of the ball that gets you just really excited, because it's not easy to do. It really isn't easy to do. And this guy, he's a pitching coach, or he's some pitch design or something like that, away from a real breaking ball, which we think we can develop now. Certainly, shouldn't be that difficult. At least for us, we were able to improve him, and he's already got the heater and he throws strikes. So he was really a fun one to watch throughout the summer. I saw him a bunch. It's
going to be really fascinating to follow him. I'll see a ton of those outings. I'll be sure to report back here to the War Room with those subsequent outings. But guys like Eli Blair, Alex Barr from Indiana, left-hander who had a great summer, really like what he's about, the way he moves, right? Even more than the rate. Again, the radar gun. Okay, whatever. TrackMan getting the analytics, love all the stuff with the fastball, right? Like, what are the characteristics of this? What can he do with spin? But how does he move? How quick is the arm? What is the projection, right? A guy like David Ramirez, not the biggest kid, but he had some great outings, multiple pitches. You got to see, is it Uli Fernsler? What a
the name. Michigan guy. What a surprise that was. He was at East Coast Pro. He was good.
I mean, he was the loudest statement there. Did he strike out like 9 guys?
Yeah, he was. What did Uli do? He would have been with the Astros, I want to say.
Okay, Astros,
right?
Yeah.
I want to say he was with the Astros. He was the guy. He was one of the guys I called you about. He punched out 6 out of 7 guys, and he did it easy. And he just sat at 91, and he did it from a nice wide slot. And you looked at it, and you thought to yourself, you know what Yuli made me feel like? The guy that people undersell and makes everybody look bad when he shows up on his college campus, and everybody goes, "Oh man, how do we miss this guy?" Same thing happened with who's the guy that went to? He's really good now. He's in the big leagues with the White Sox.
Crochet.
Nobody knew about Crochet. He's tucked away in South Mississippi, somewhere in Biloxi. He shows up at UT, and you go, "Uh-oh." That's what this was like. With all of these other high-profile names and whatnot, Yuli just went out there and just absolutely dominated with 91. He's got a huge back, big shoulders. He was fun and interesting. Like, that's the sneaky one. We were talking about sleepers the other day, late bloomers. This guy would fall right into that bucket.
And again, the ease of operate. Hey, let me ask you this, because I think you were there last year to see, or 2 years ago to see Will Kirk. Were there any similarities? Like, hey, these were easy innings. This guy works well. Were there any similarities?
Yeah, the similarity was Kirk was really, really good. Kirk's at where? Duke now?
At Virginia.
He's at Virginia now, right? So I remember Kirk at East Coast Pro, and he dominated with command. The difference was between these two players, and I just said it. Yuli, to me, now I didn't get up on him, but you're making these quick notes and whatnot on these players. This guy looked big. This guy looked like the big, wide-shouldered guy that you wake up one day and you're like, wow, now he's 94 to 97 and he can pitch. So that's what stood out with this guy was the frame size, the ability to get outs now with his stuff in the strike zone with the bridge to projection for more.
A guy like Jack Bauer, super intriguing, square shoulder, 6'4", up to 96, 97, real big spin metrics, change up. I think all 3 pitches have a chance to be above average. As the strikes continue to come along, his ceiling is super high. So I'm excited to see what he does next spring. Xavier Mitchell, a Texas product, Dallas area kid, super easy. You talk about almost boring innings because he just never raises. Everything comes out of the hand, 90-92, tunnels the breaking ball. Briggs McKenzie, though, is the one I want to talk about. and we're
Oh,
going to
you're
see you in
stealing my
Miami.
you're stealing my thunder on Maddox and Briggs.
So they're back to back here. Two guys that we really like: Maddox Miller, Briggs McKenzie. McKenzie, who had like a foot injury a year ago, which I don't think you were privy to. Comes to the future games as a rising sophomore. He's outstanding, commits to LSU. This guy looks like he's on a first-round path. The next summer, he had a foot injury throughout the spring. You talk about the Grand Canyon effect. You start shortening the stride. Everything kind of gets thrown off. The arm action wasn't the same last summer. This summer, back to form. Nothing excited me more than getting the text from you. Hey, this Briggs McKenzie kid's really good. So tell me what you saw from him.
Yeah, he was. It was body type. It was a 2-pitch lefty. He did it really easy. He got good results. The fastball was sitting kind of like 90 to 93. Spin rates were good. You know, he landed his stuff for strikes. And you talked before about starter. This guy screamed starter. He screamed body type's going to continue to grow. He throws strikes already. There were so many good things about McKenzie, and he did it. You know, when the guys run out on the mound and they have to perform, he was able to go out and perform in front of a big scout crowd at East Coast Pro. So he was I say a pleasant surprise because I didn't really know him or have any expectations going in, and he kind of stole the show there with his 3 innings of work.
Now, what about
one of the better lefties in the country? One of the better performances. I mean, Appenzeller was good, Briggs was good, Yuli was good, but he fell, as did Maddox Miller. These guys fell into an elite class of players where there was projection, some now stuff, and they were able to show you the ability to do it. And there's not a lot of guys that can do that. They can check all 3 of those boxes.
And I think that the biggest importance to the mainstream, like, can this guy start? Hey, this comes out easy because, right, if scouts are good. Area scouts, they do their job. Hey, we can envision this kid getting stronger. We can envision him adding weight. We can envision him having more velocity. What does he bring with the full package right now? The profile, what is the pitch selection? How does he move? Can he do it for multiple innings?
I want to get to Maddox Miller. I've been kind of chomping at the bit because there's a lesson to be learned here with Maddox Miller. So he doesn't have a breaking ball. So what? I don't know what that means. It means we can't teach it? It means we can't help it? Because I watched him pitch and he was really, really good. Fastball, changeup, athletic. I mean, if you can't project on Maddox Miller, does he have to get stronger? Yeah, that would be a priority. If it was me, I'm going to get that guy stronger this offseason, but he can already pitch. He's got enough fastball. He's got a nice changeup. It took literally 5 months, 6 months for Wade LeBlanc to get to the University of Alabama without a breaking ball and became Wade LeBlanc, a first or second rounder. It took 6 months for Mikey Minor and carrying his 86 to 90 mile an hour heater and no breaking ball, but field a pitch. It took Derek Johnson about 6 months to get him from just a regular college freshman all the way up into the first round. So when you look at Maddox Miller, what's the difference? What's the difference? I mean, he's got a nice frame. He's 90, 91 right now. He's got a changeup right now. We just got to get him stronger, and we got to get the breaking ball there. You do that, you have a quintessential major league starter. So he was exciting too. I really liked him.
It's amazing how that velo continues to come, and just how little that I worry about. Like, even it's very rare if I carry a radar gun. It's almost just for content purposes of I need to put a number in here. But in the end, hey, what do I care about? This kid is a sophomore. This kid is a junior. Well, he's not pitching in October right now. I'm envisioning him 6 years from now.
There's nothing wrong with having Jackson Job's slider. Of course, we love that stuff. Like, who doesn't like to go and see big time breaking balls and all these kind of things? But when you get into these left-handers, how often do I put down on my card, needs his slider to strike guys out? That's usually not an endorsement. And if I'm putting those things down, the slider better be great. There better be pitchability. There better be command, because what I'm saying is his fastball is not part of it. Well, how about these guys like Maddox Miller that he punches out 5 guys in 2 innings without a breaking ball? I'd say that's pretty good. And that speaks to his ability to throw strikes. That speaks to his ability to use his fastball, how his fastball plays. It speaks to his ability to use a changeup, or have a changeup, use a changeup. So I would elevate Maddox Miller a little bit. He's a sneaky good one.
Ooh, I'm excited to see what he's got this spring. Brock Kettleson's also on this list. I would put him more similar to Spencer Jones than
Oh yeah, I
probably
like that. Yeah, I can see
anybody
that.
else in
Sure.
here. And his stuff kind of I still love his bat. So like I'm such a position player guy where like let's
Right.
follow this bat the whole way. But beyond him, Aiden Stillman, who's a guy who was with Team USA, it's big stuff. Does it hit? Is it going to be a reliever profile? He does get swing and miss in the zone. Big fan of that. Jack McKernan, who there's some effort to the delivery, but there's a nice track record of success. He's an ultra competitive kid. Kind of got some Carter Holton type vibes on him, where he gets on the mound. He's trying to hunt some swings and misses. He's competing. Ty Briscoe is an excellent fastball, good frame, another two-way guy who can throw it. Like, those are Texans. You know they're going to bring it in the spring. They're going to face some good guys. Cooper Underwood, another one who had a really good summer. Georgia kid. We're talking about the big four here. Connor Essenberg. Shoot, we got a lot of two-way guys on here. Essenberg, who I'm excited to see him at the Super 60. He's got some serious self-confidence, which I love the swagger that he brings. Will Haas is a Minnesota kid who I've been a huge
I like Will Haas, the left-hander.
Oh, yeah. The last 2 years, now he's up. Just had him a couple weeks ago. He's starting to fall off 91 and 94. He's always had big spin, ultra left-handed. I love what he brings to the diamond. He was very fun to follow at the future games. Austin Weiss, another guy who collected whiffs in the zone from Maryland. Jackson Hoyt's on here. There's a lot of fun. And we talk about, again, get the guardrails on, put them in the lane, and we're going to follow it the rest of the way. And I think sometimes some of these guys, like Will Haas, will play this spring, but then he'll get that time to develop. He may make a huge jump. And all of a sudden you're taking the chance from, hey, we're putting you into this 600K area. Now you're moving up to the 1.4, 1.5. And that's kind of how I go through my head. Like, what is the value on this player at this time?
And therein lies part of the problem, is that you some of these pitchers, like Will Haas, I'm looking at his stuff. This guy was really, really good.
Yeah.
He had a feel for a change, kind of a medium, slender build, had a feel for a strike zone, had a feel for his changeup, 91 to 94, and struck a bunch of guys out. And here we are. Now we're going to go to Minnesota, where it's going to snow until June. You might get one look at him, and there's going to be this like recency bias with some of these college guys. That's where high school guys get bogged down, which is fine because they end up on a college campus, then they sign, then they move into the big leagues a little bit faster for the most part. But that's where a guy like this can get caught a little bit behind, and he's really talented. He was really good for the Royals.
I feel like there has been a shift, and it may have happened even longer ago, but the last few years, even to those cold weather arms. Hey, kind of understand, like, hey, we're going in on these guys. And I love Southern California, Georgia, Florida kids as much as anybody. Like the big time prospects, they're still really good. But I'm not discounting, hey, these cold weather guys play in different conditions.
That's an easy sell for me. Carson Milbrandt, Jacob Miller, Noble Meyer's a little bit colder. It's Oregon. Thomas White's certainly cold.
I think
that's
of
an easy sell for me.
And maybe the recency, like I went down to Southern California this year and watching some of the arms. And hey, they're all really good. But in my head, I'd bounce around. Like, it's probably why scouting departments have guys cross-checking and national supervisors or whatever that may be. But in my head, I was thinking, there's some cold weather arms that are better than these guys. I have watched them. I know what they have. And I feel the hype of the locality of this. They're not as good as those guys. And it was something I could really decipher sitting at one particular game. Like, those guys are better. And it ended up fiscally showing itself in the draft this year. We'll see what happens, because I will say one thing. I'll go to bat on those California kids. Like, they go into pro ball and they expect to be in the big leagues. And there's something about, they flourish through systems and they move up. That's a big reason why there's more of them than any other state in the country in the big leagues. But I will say, going back to the Southpaws, like the idea of a Frank Mazzucato and those guys who kind of elevate themselves throughout the offseason, you come through, and it's not so much, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it's not so much about, hey, this guy's got to hit this mega threshold versus he moves well. Will Kirk, I can't wait to see what Will Kirk does in Charlottesville, because he was 88 to 91, 88 to 92 throughout this past spring. Every year you see it. College freshman, you talked about the kid at Vanderbilt. Hey, now he's 91, 94. He's touching a 6 in October in the Fall World Series. wow, guys throw harder. They get on meal programs. They get on strength programs. It's one of the more exciting things in development.
So you want to be there for Kirk. Because Kirk didn't do it and he didn't elevate his game to come out early, that doesn't really mean anything. All it means is his timeline might be different than Noble Myers. His timeline might be different than Thomas White's or Mazzucato. It doesn't mean that he's not a good prospect. And you need to be there though. And that's why you loosen the guardrails. And that's why you are a little bit more aggressive with these pitchers, because you don't know which one it's going to happen for. The development can really pop. Did Bobby Witt really change that much? Did Anthony Volpe really change that much? No, he was a good. Do I expect to go in and see Eli Willits next year and all of a sudden he's a 70 runner with 70 bat speed? No, he's showing you what he is right now. But some of these pitchers, and I think we've exhausted this, they can change. And if they don't and they end up at Virginia or they end up at Vandy, then that's just the path that's been chosen for them. But you have to be there to see it.
And we will be there to see it. I can't wait for the fall action. We got the All-American game coming up. We will rehash. We'll have our initial draft board coming at the end of the fall as we get some good looks with Dr. Seif, you, and myself. DJ, this has been awesome. Just ripping off some great pitching intel in this prep class. They've been put in lanes. There's some guardrails out there. We will continue to be there. You can always count on Prep Baseball being at the ballpark to provide the most comprehensive and credible information in the industry. But until next time, we'll see you guys at the ballpark.